Dr. Scanlon, thank you for making time to talk to CGTN. How dire do you think the biodiversity loss situation is on our planet?
We've had now a lot of good science come forward to let us know what the state of biodiversity is. And the creation of the Intergovernmental Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, known as IPBES, was really quite groundbreaking. It released a report a few years ago, and it said that of the 8.7 million species on planet Earth, 1 million of them are at risk of extinction. And they're at risk of extinction because of 5 main factors. Firstly, habitat loss. Secondly, overexploitation. Thirdly, climate change. Fourth, invasive species. And finally, pollution. So these 5 primary drivers are leading to a massive loss of biodiversity. They've predicted, around 1 million species over coming years. So we have a very good science base.
You mentioned a very important point there about climate change. Now, how do you see climate change compounding the threats to biodiversity?
Yeah, really good question. So biodiversity loss makes climate change worse. Climate change makes biodiversity loss worse. So they're completely intertwined. And we know that around 56% of anthropocentric emissions, carbon emissions, are absorbed by nature. And we also know that over a third of the mitigation we have to achieve between now and 2030 can be achieved through what are called nature-based solutions. So keeping our environment intact, using nature as part of the solution is absolutely critical to combating climate change. We will not be able to mitigate or adapt to climate change if we're not looking after biodiversity, our nature. Equally, if climate change gets worse and worse, it makes biodiversity loss worse and worse. So, they're all completely interconnected. But we have a huge opportunity as an international community to do so much more in terms of reversing the trends on biodiversity loss, looking after nature. That'll sequester so much more carbon, help us adapt. And to be honest, it's much cheaper and much easier than having to tackle some of the much harder issues such as manufacturing, transport, etc.
And how can responses to these two intertwined problems be coordinated to mitigate their effects ASAP?
So we're starting to see the conventions and their parties recognise you can't look at biodiversity loss in isolation, climate change, desertification, etc. You have to look at how these issues are converging. So we are seeing, for example, that the various processes they have, for example, under biodiversity and climate, they are cross-referencing each other. So what's called a nationally determined contribution in climate change is picking up the biodiversity agenda, nature-based solutions, and the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plans under the Convention on Biological Diversity are picking up on climate issues, the nationally determined contributions. So we're seeing that crossover. The same with desertification, land management and restoring land and avoiding land becoming degraded is equally important here. So I think the important thing is we have the different silos, but they're starting to break down the walls. We're starting to look at these together, and nature-based solutions is what cuts across all of them.
Right, and we are also making a lot of very clear targets. Among the targets of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, for instance, adopted at COP15, are 30% conservation of land, sea and inland waters, and also 30% restoration of degraded ecosystems worldwide by the year 2030. Why are those goals so crucial?
Yeah, they're really important. I mean, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework was a massive achievement. It's not easy reaching consensus amongst so many countries, all of the countries of the world, around such an ambitious agreement. So really hats off to everyone involved there. But it's critically important in terms of protecting biodiversity, combating climate change, addressing land degradation, that we have a good estate of protected areas. And we have to be ambitious with that. And you've just given us the statistics there, the 30 by 30. We need to be ambitious. We need to stop losing our natural environment, stop losing habitat, because these are critically important places.
Well, we're living in a world full of conflicts. Habitat destruction and environmental degradation due to farming are driving biodiversity loss, but we need food for survival as well. So how can we balance the need for food security and protecting biodiversity?
Food security relies upon biodiversity. You know, you need worms in the soil, you need fungi in the soil, you need ladybirds to eat little bugs that are affecting crops. You need the bees to pollinate. So, you know, and you need access to genetic diversity in terms of all sorts of crops that we need now and into the future. So again, biodiversity loss is linked to food security, and food security is linked to biodiversity loss. So we need to look at the interconnection there. So I think it's important to look at it. We have to stop clearing habitat. We have to, you know, look at using the land we have available for farming, but also look at land that's been degraded and how we can rehabilitate that land to produce food. We have to look at our own consumption patterns. Are we eating too much meat? Do we need to eat more plants? So we need to look at this from multiple perspectives. And the whole protected areas estate is completely intertwined with this. So, you know, it's really hard. It's very hard to get the balance right. It's based on, you know, place by place to work out how you do it. But at the macro level, stop clearing, look at consumption habits and what we're eating, look at restoring degraded land, and also look at how we're farming, because you can farm in a way that is not so destructive for biodiversity and can, in fact, harmoniously coexist with biodiversity, or you can do it in a very destructive way.
Science and technology are advancing. We need more innovative ways to protect our environment and wildlife as well. World Wildlife Day in 2024 this year will raise awareness of digital technologies in wildlife protection. So how valuable do you think digital innovations are in ecological conservation?
Great. Yeah, I mean, 3rd of March, UN Wildlife Day is a very special day. I was involved in the first one, and China's been a fantastic supporter right from the start of UN World Wildlife Day. And in fact, I was in Dalian in China in 2017 at the WEF event there, and I was giving a talk on wildlife and wildlife trafficking and the use of modern technologies in terms of how we're going to deal with that. And things have evolved a bit since then, because artificial intelligence wasn't really talked about much in 2017, but it is in 2024. Now, as you suggested, you know, deploying modern technologies can really be a game changer in relation to managing wildlife effectively, including managing well legal trade in wildlife and combating wildlife trafficking. You know, and I've seen, just by way of example, what customs can now do at the border in terms of scanning and looking for contraband, where artificial intelligence has been used, if you like, to educate the system to detect contraband that you never would have been able to detect before. So really, that's amazing. And also the advances in the use of forensic technology, DNA technology, where you can determine the age and origin, you can determine of wildlife, you can determine whether it's been captively bred or if it's been, you know, taken from the wild. So, you know, the depth and breadth of technologies available is massive, can be so advantageous.
Dr. Scanlon, last but not the least, if you could have a conversation with any species in the world, which would it be and what would you ask?
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question, because I love so many species. I mean, I grew up in Australia. It'd be great to talk to a koala, but you have to wake it up because it spends a lot of its day sleeping. But I think, you know, it's a bit hard to move away from the elephant. I mean, because the elephant is so clever. It's a matriarchal system there. They have interrelationships that last a lifetime, the way they rear their young. I mean, it'd be very interesting to speak to an elephant, if you could, and ask the elephant for a reflection on us. You know, we observe elephants a lot, and we observe their behavior, and we make observations about their behavior and what have you. I'd be very curious to know, they've been observing our behavior for a long time. What's their reflection upon humanity, how we're going, how we've been treating the elephant, and what they would think about the way forward to achieve harmonious coexistence between elephants and people, and wildlife more generally and people, because what we're really striving for is that harmonious coexistence.
Well, I would choose giant pandas.
to
they're
ask
pretty
them
cool too.
how, I mean, I really want to know how they feel about the changes they've been witnessing throughout all those 8 to 9 million years that they've been through. How do they feel about that? I don't know. Well, thank you very much,
That would be
Dr.
amazing.
Scanlon. Thank you very much for accepting our interview on CGTN.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.